Well, happy 420 to you. If that means anything to you, it's a big day. And if it doesn't, you're going, what the hell does that mean? Then don't worry about it.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, John. It's a beautiful Wednesday here in the Real Talk studio. That's John Hicks, technical producer. Coming up in just a moment, I am so excited to check in with Calgary's 6th Poet Laureate. He's just been named just a short time ago. Wakefield Brewster is going to join us. Absolutely amazing stuff. We're going to start, by the way, he's given us permission. He's a spoken word artist. He's an award-winning poet, a revered poet.
Incredible.
Made an incredible career across the country. Yeah. Grew up in Toronto. We're going to talk about his background, but he's given us permission to roll one of his poems into the interview, and so we're going to start the show with that. What a way to start a Wednesday's show. Later on in this edition of Real Talk, in about a half hour from now, we're going to talk to Blaise Boehmer, who is a senior Jason Kenney staffer. He's been a senior staffer within the Saskatchewan Party. He's done a lot of government work across Western Canada, and he's worked campaigns. This guy understands politics, understands conservative politics in particular. We'll get his take on some of the stories that are making news, not just here in our home province of Alberta, but across the country. You see the numbers today. The numbers are out. Canada's experiencing its highest inflation in 31 years.
Listening on the way here.
6.7%.
I thought 5 was high.
People talk about 1.52% is kind of, I mean, you'd like to see 0.
Yeah.
Although there's implications in a whole bunch of directions, but 6.7, that's a story we're keeping an eye on. And, of course, other news as it develops. The show's going to move fast today, and those are the best kinds. We're going to take you out to Jasper, and we're launching a fresh edition of our Question of the Week presented by our friends at Ask Why Station. So let's get started. Bitcoin, well, you know, they've been with us as our title sponsor from the very beginning, from episode 1. We're working on a roundtable. We're going to take a look at cryptocurrency and the blockchain and NFTs and all of this kind of future-looking stuff that's becoming relevant to news present day. Adam O'Brien will be part of that roundtable, the CEO of Bitcoin. Well, if you'd like to learn more about his story or what his team does, you can find the link to their website right at the top of the sponsors page on ours at ryanjesperson.com. Well, Wakefield Brewster named Calgary's Poet Laureate for the next couple of years. He will join us live in just a moment. Known certainly as one of Canada's most powerful professional performance poets. And here's an example why.
This poem is called I Can. After 2 decades of delivery on the MIC, unbelievably, people still asking me, what can you do with poetry? That question used to make me angry. It used to get me hot. Now I tell them have a seat and ask them how much time they got. For you see, with poetry, I can. Duly dance down those same halls of learning where I once had the yearning to be a well-accomplished human with a 4.0, but my GPA was sadly way far below. I never got the knack of the educational flow. They made me sit still, so I stood still. I can confidently, comfortably cruise into classrooms where I was once coerced to create a captured, cornered mental state so I could clearly create a way to hate my own mind by my educators. They were edu-haters. They formed a form to form my formative years, tainted with intolerance and a tidal wave of tears that sailed all of my dreams away from me. For they likened my self-image with one of stupidity. It was all that I heard and all that I could see. I can now be free. When I was once imprisoned by a mental prism, my errant splay thoughts were like hot colored rocks. Endless ammunition for the slings of possibility, but impossibly, all of my targets eluded me. For I was living in the kingdom of couldn't be me. I couldn't see the lock, so I didn't need the key. And when they finally let me go, they said, you don't know poetry. I can versify being victimized into a valiant victory. Verify that when you vilify, you eventually gotta deal with me. The transformation was tremendous. I took the word stupid and I made it stupendous. I began to manhandle the land of language, that language in apathetic and anonymous anguish. I did decide to dissect and divide indefinitely, indubitably, what diction was due to me. Stab a psyche with a simile, sometimes slip left of center, see, so as to step off into a soliloquy. Ale the English alphabet with an oral atrocity. I can wear the face of mental agility, dispel the myth of dental fragility, and proudly embrace my so-called disability. ADD, ADHD, OCD, PTSD. Now I've made an acronymphomaniac out of me, and never once before have I so ever loved ME. I can turn my inventive imagination into a physical infatuation, not like sugar, not the hard refined, not like sweetener, not the artificial kind. I don't need heroin because I'm a heroine, my own mind. Spent some time with my mentality, and what I did find is I can learn. And poetry taught me when the truth is unfurled, I'm the only one man who can change my world, so I can do anything. What can I do with poetry? I ask you, why don't you tell me?
That is three-time Calgary Poetry Slam champion and the new Poet Laureate of Calgary, Wakefield Brewster. Welcome to Real Talk, my man. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's very, very exciting time for me.
This is a really neat way for us to open a show, Wakefield. We oftentimes take a look at the stories that make news around the world, oftentimes the stories that bring duress and heartache, and we talk about war and conflict. Poetry can be your angle, is your angle of approach on so many different things in life. Do you see life? Do you interpret life through the eyes or the mind of a poet everywhere you go?
I do. Poetry is the way I relate to the world around me. Literally, I do my absolute best to listen to the world as effectively, as earnestly as possible, so that I may one day, several times, whatever, earn the opportunities to speak back to the world. Really, it's a give and take, it's an ebb and tide, it's a call and response, and it's how I relate to the world around me.
When did you know that this was how your mind worked? When was your earliest understanding of that you processed life in an artistic way that was maybe a little bit, maybe more cerebral or more esoteric than some of the other young people around you?
I would say poetically that began when I was 16, and it was by fluke. However, my entrance into the arts, the world of the arts, began at age 6. So I was always in the arts, and you find artistic people have quite open minds. And really, in the end of all things, poetry picked me. However, it happened at age 16, and it gripped me like a nightmare, and it's never let go.
Huh? Why a nightmare?
Oh, well, people understand what that kind of grip is like. That's what it's like. Tight. It's like stucco to a ceiling. I can feel this. It's wonderful. Relating to the world around me through poetry is one of the most beautiful operations of living that I've ever encountered.
Wakefield, you were raised in Toronto, right? Your parents, are you first generation Canadian? Your parents came to Canada from Barbados, is that right?
That's correct. And we lived in Scarborough, actually.
Okay. And how did that shape your development as a poet? You moved to Calgary, where you're now Poet Laureate. You will be for the next couple of years. 5 or 6 years ago, but the formative years of your development as an artist in Toronto or in Scarborough?
They were. I began my career 22 years ago, and the first 5 were there. I've been here actually going on 17 years. I've been here for a long time. I'm a Calgarian bona fide. So I've cut my teeth in Toronto, in my hometown, and then I came out here and grew up. That's exactly what it was. I began there, and I grew up here. And the work and the journey is evident. This is home. This is home.
Have you been able to put your finger on what spurred that development? Was it the age you were at? Was it experiences that you had in Western Canada? What was it?
It's good to leave what you know is home. It's good to go far away from everything you believe you know. It's good to get out there all by yourself and see what the world is like. It's very insular when you are in a place that validates everything that you believe you know. I didn't want to be one of those Canadians that think one of the greatest things about being a Canadian is not being an American. And being in Toronto, where there's so much of everything, the most multicultural city on the planet, people often mistake being around so much for being with those different things, those different areas, peoples, cultures, places. So the boom was still on. And when you're a poet, and you haven't made it to certain levels yet, that also means you're a professional retail worker. So coming out here was easy to just latch on into retail and work on my art and begin to grow.
So as mentioned in your introduction, I mean, I could go on, and I probably should. I mean, you were the inaugural Poet of Honor at the People's Poetry Festival. You were a shortlist and a finalist for Calgary's Poet Laureate on 2 occasions before being named just a short time ago. You were the inaugural TD Artist Incubator at Arts Commons, the poet in residence there. You've been working with young people, with students for a long time with your page-to-stage productions, which is amazing, I know as well. How does this elevate the work that you've been doing? And being named Poet Laureate, I mean, what did that mean to you? It's a huge honor. You're just the 6th in the city's history.
This is a huge honor. 6th in the city's history, first Black poet in the city's history. Working with young people, what I really hope to gain from being Poet Laureate, especially as it relates to younger people, is access. I would like a lot more access in schools and learning institutions to, I like to say, interrupt the evolution of younger people's literary journeys or journeys through literacy, and bring poetry to them in this very interactive, powerful way, and begin to get that message through to them that there are many ways to say many things without like, right, S-bombs and F-bombs. There are a lot of ways to get access into worlds that you previously don't have access to, or even the adult worlds. Especially with younger teens, I let them know, hey, adults, we hold the world ransom to you. There's stuff you want, and your age alone keeps you at the precipice of it, but not in it. And sometimes, you know, adults let you have a little bit of that gravy. They give you access to things. Well, it doesn't happen with a bunch of attitude and bravado and toxic masculinity and all of that. No, actually, it happens with language. Language precedes everything. So I like younger people to know, think a few times before you speak and look at the results. Watch the world around you change when your language changes.
I love you. I could listen to you talk about language all day and sort of the intentional nature of it. You know, when you say no ums and ahs, no S-bombs and F-bombs, your cadence is like tactical, and the delivery is where the art is. I mean, poetry slam champions, or you talk about like the art of spoken word and somebody that's really great at it, and it's absolutely captivating. But of course, so much thought and shaping and everything that goes into that performance. I mean, of course your words are intentional. What does that do to the process of conviction for you when you're talking about social issues or when you're challenging other people through your poetry?
Only recently have I come to this title of social poet. I've been called a slam poet, performance poet, this, that. I've been even called crappy poet. However, recently, social poet has been tagged onto me because I speak about what happens to the everyman, what happens in general, things that I can't speak to the elite, I can't speak to destitution, but I can speak to the general bandwidth of where a lot of people that I interact with are living. And I speak to basically the living dynamics around us. I'm not writing out my rainbows and unicorns. I write about harder things, darker things, deeper things, things that, as I said, grip people like nightmares, including nightmares. I even write about dreams. But I write about the things that people can bond over more than your neighbor who wins 48 million. That does nothing for you. But your neighbor that goes through tragedy, all of a sudden the whole neighborhood is there to help. We bond in darker things, it would seem. So I like to bring those things to light. Poetry, I see them as stories. Short stories, they have messages. Messages are a form of communication. Short stories have a feeling of a beginning, a middle, and end, and take you from here to there. I look at poetry as a means of communication. And when we can talk about the darker things, poetry helps bring them to light.
How are you approaching your role as Poet Laureate? I mean, because you have an opportunity, obviously, to put your stamp on what these 2 years will look like. I would imagine a certain element of it will be to reflect the community, but also to challenge the community. How do you approach it?
I look at it as, number one, I'm the first Black Poet Laureate. That already changes the face of everything. The dialogue has already changed because the face has changed. And that's a great thing. This is a cultural capital of Canada, Calgary is. So it's great to see that the face of poetry in Calgary looks like mine, looks BIPOC, looks different than what people have been accustomed to. I think right away, that alone changes all the dynamics of what it is that I can and will do. What I really hope to do is bring poetry to every circle. I hope to reach every corner. I want everyone to know that poetry is for the people. Poetry is for them. It's in us. And I want to.
I think we might have lost our connection with Wakefield, but we'll get him back. I have confidence because I know that this conversation needs to happen. Johnny, let me buy you some time. Why don't I mention a couple of our advertisers, and we'll get Wakefield Brewster back. We've been listening to Calgary's Poet Laureate. He was just named so Tuesday, I think. It was April 12th. Introduced to council, at least, and the sixth person to be Calgary's Poet Laureate. Back with him in just a second. Let me remind you how proud we are here at Real Talk to be partners of Northwest Fest. This is Canada's running documentary film festival. You can check it out online at northwestfest.ca. It starts May 5th, and it's going to run all the way through till May 15th. These are in-cinema screenings, which they're really excited about after last year's online event. You can find the full schedule and ticket links again at northwestfest.ca. We're extremely proud to be the opening night presenting sponsor for the screening, the opening night film, Who You Gonna Call? This is the story of the legendary artist Ray Parker Jr. You know him. He brought the world the Ghostbusters song, but the success of that song overshadowed an incredible career. We're going to be talking to Ray Parker Jr., and we'll have more information on how our Patreon supporters are going to be able to get their way into that screening live. Again, Northwest Fest from May 5th through 15th. We'd love to see you there. You can get your tickets at northwestfest.ca. If you're on your way out of town, you're going to be flying out of Edmonton's International Airport. We encourage you to keep your money in your pocket, keep your vehicle parked at Jet Set Parking. With the promo code REALTALK at jetsetparking.com, you can park your vehicle at Edmonton's International Airport in the Jet Set lot for just $7 a day. That's where I parked our family's vehicle when we recently went on vacation. It's easy. You swipe in after registering online, leave yourself 24 hours ahead of time, and then on the way out, you swipe out. There's a shuttle to take you to the terminal every 5 minutes, and it was a great experience. JetSetParking.com, the promo code REALTALK to book your airport parking all the way through till the end of 2022. And speaking of saving money, everybody's paying for utilities, right? I mean, in one way, shape, or form, you've got internet, electricity, and natural gas to consider. Why not take your business to your friendly local utilities provider at Park Power? You can compare rates today, lock in into the fixed rate option. That's what a lot of people are doing right now to find that stability. And don't forget, if you bundle your services, you're going to save on admin costs. Plus, the promo code 2022-REALTALK gets you $70 off your first bill at parkpower.ca. Johnny, we're ready to rock? No, we've lost Wakefield Brewster. That's all right. It's too bad. You know what we'll have to do is we'll get him back on the show. We'll put together like an arts roundtable or something like that. The Wi-Fi signal or whatever it is conspiring against us. But I'm so grateful that we had 15 minutes or so with Calgary's Poet Laureate joining us just a short time after being named to the role. Absolutely amazing stuff. You can find out more about what he's doing online by checking out his website, wakefieldbrewster.com. I wanted to ask him. He writes, I am a poet of my people. He says, I've been an active poet, participant, a producer, and a promoter. in Canada's poetry and spoken word community since humble beginnings in Toronto in 1999. 21 years, almost half my life, he says, I've spent fiercely and ferociously spearheading poetry and spoken word into every single circle of society I can infiltrate. And I love that. I would love to talk to him about the infiltration factor. You can follow him on Twitter at Lyrical Pitbull. Let him know how much you enjoyed his appearance here on Real Talk. And of course, we'll make sure that we get a chance to welcome him back. His role will carry over 2 years as Calgary's Poet Laureate. Are we good to go? You think we should take it? Why don't we try one more time? I know.
Let's try again here. He
Johnny,
looks to be good.
You've been doing an amazing job behind the scenes to make this happen. Let's see if we can get Wakefield Brewster back. Well, my man, it's good to see your face again. We will keep our fingers crossed. I will thank my lucky stars. We have you back. I was just reading from your bio at wakefieldbrewster.com. And I was reading how you write that 21 years, Wakefield, almost half your life, you say you've spent fiercely and ferociously spearheading poetry and spoken word into every single circle of society you can infiltrate. I love that you used that word. What did you mean by that?
People don't believe that poetry. You really have to get it in there insidiously. You have to force it in there. You have to trick it in there. But lately, and over the last few years, for me anyway, I'm starting to get invites into these unusual places where poetry is not normally seen, presented, or expected. That's one of the most wonderful things about my career, is that I end up in places being a poet where poetry is not expected to be. It's not even seen as a component that is part of whatever is happening. And I bring it into those circles, those spaces, those places, those rooms, and I make poetry part of everyone's life.
Can you think, has there been an instance or one that, there's probably been many, but one that jumps to mind where you could tell that your art or that your message was resonating with somebody that maybe didn't expect it? When you're making eye contact with people, when you're speaking to people, can you tell when it resonates like that? Has there been a moment like that? I think we maybe froze up again, Johnny. That's too bad. Hey, listen, we tried our best. That's Wakefield Brewster. Absolutely love that guy, obviously. When's the last time you talked to somebody like that? It's just like, as he speaks, I'm just hanging on every single word.
Because the art is flowing out of him. I wanted to hear more.
We'll get him back.
Have him back.
We'll get him back. Yeah, and maybe we'll get him in studio. We'll figure that out.
That'd be better.
That was Wakefield Brewster. You can follow him on Twitter at Lyrical Pitbull. Why don't we take a moment right now? I'll give you a second to load up this video. You know the one that I'm asking for. It's April 20th. But first, why don't I just mention a couple of our sponsors to buy you a second here, Johnny, on the fly. Nobody better at this than this guy who's able to just pivot. He's able to just pivot.
Stop.
Our friends at Eden Landscaping can do the exact same thing. Whether it's retaining walls you're looking for, maybe you're looking for that fitted patio stone, an outdoor kitchen. If you want it in place by this summer, now is the time to get in touch with our friends at Eden Landscaping. You'll find them online, the custom landscape builder, still family-owned after more than 20 years in the business, at landscapeedmonton.ca. Of course, they've got a long list of referrals. You can talk to folks that have hired them in past. In some circumstances, hired them several times. And of course, you can check out their portfolio online. You can envision how their expertise might fit into your outdoor space. Ultra-modern design, natural beauty, stunning stonework. Eden Landscaping does it all at landscapeedmonton.ca. Our friends at Kubi Energy want to remind you, you can get a free quote on solar today by visiting kubienergy.ca. That's how you can get the ball rolling. Doesn't mean you got to have a crew on your roof the next day, but if you want to look into what the cost might be, what the savings might look like, where the technology's at these days, and of course, what opportunities are available to cash into incentive programs. They're experts on all of this stuff. Check out their blog link at kubienergy.ca, including information on the Canada Greener Homes Grant. Kubi Energy presents Positive Reflections. The first show of every week, we get the show started off right. We get the week focused in a positive direction. You can send us your emails, your positive reflections, to talk@ryanjesperson.com. And our friends at Infinity Healthcare know what it's like to want the best for a family member, including allowing them to age in place. It's becoming more and more of a trend. As people age, they want to do it in their own home, especially if there's issues like, for example, Alzheimer's at play, where familiarity, even the smallest things, can have a big impact. But for that relationship to work, it's got to be a perfect pairing when it comes to your home care providers. That's what Infinity Healthcare does with their personality matching service. They don't stop till they find a perfect fit for the loved one in your family. You can find them online at infinity-8.ca. That's Infinity Healthcare, also under the sponsors tab on our website.
Just folks in the chat, they wanted more too of Wakefield. They just they're like, drat.
This is a like kind of a good thing. It's a lousy thing when an interview drops out and when we don't have the proper signal. And of course, we want to keep that conversation going. It's the worst when you have questions you left on the table and you're like, oh, I wanted to pick his brain on that. But it's also good, when we're left wanting, right? It's good. We got to get him back. We got to make a commitment to get him back. You know what we should do is get 3 spoken word artists, put a round table together, and really blow our minds.
A round table battle sounds incredible.
How good would that be? Hey, speaking of the live chat, we heard from a friend of ours, Amber Cannon, and I wanted to take this second to mention this.
Yeah.
Amber was on the show before. Did you see this message?
I did.
I appreciated that she reached out to us. Amber came on the show. We were talking a while ago about different initiatives across the country. It was Toronto, Calgary, and Red Deer in particular that we talked about. Police departments, or at least civic initiatives, pilot programs. They're trying to divert 911 calls relating to mental health away from police. They're trying to make sure that mental health counselors and resource providers, social workers, etc., step in and are able to manage these things in a way that we know the research shows is best to do. Long story short, Amber reached out to us. She said, I've lived experience here, and she came on the show, and I was regaling that. I was remembering back to that last week on the show, and I incorrectly stated that Amber had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she reached out to me. She sent me an email, and she said, as a matter of fact, she said, my diagnosis is borderline personality disorder, and she said, I'd appreciate you making the clarification. It does matter. Amber, I appreciate that as well. We want to make sure our conversations are accurate, our assessments are accurate. She went on to remind me that May 1st is Borderline Personality Awareness Day. And she said, I think that would be very important for your listeners to learn more about what borderline personality disorder is and how to support people with borderline personality disorder. Amber, we're so grateful that you took the time to get in touch with us. My apologies for the error, and thanks for putting that on our radar. Want to learn something. We endeavor to learn something every single day on this show, and a large part of that is because we have people that, like Amber, that are engaged, that are holding our feet to the fire and making sure that we're accurate all the time. So we really appreciate that. We're going to be talking provincial politics in just a second with Blaise Boehmer. He's got a ton of experience in government. He's the director, right now, he's currently the director of corporate communications and public affairs for National Public Relations. Let's just go to Blaise now if he's ready to rock, Johnny. You got him all lined up. Audio's good to go. Blaise has previous political work that a lot of people know about. I mean, if you pay attention to politics on the prairies, Alberta, Saskatchewan, he spent 4 years with the Saskatchewan Party government, 2 years with Alberta's United Conservative government, including through 2 leadership races, now Premier Jason Kenney's director of communications, the leadership races in 2016, 2017, making his Real Talk debut. Blaise Boehmer, it's nice to see your face. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Happy 420.
A happy 420. Is that something that you would observe, Blaise? Are you an enthusiast?
I may.
Yeah. Has that become less of a political conversation, you think, in the last few years? We're going to roll a clip a little later on in the show. It's been a year since I spoke with the Prime Minister here about 420. Kind of caught him off guard, I think. He was the Prime Minister that legalized cannabis. And I'll still hear people say, sort of colloquially, well, Justin Trudeau, he wanted to get the pothead vote, or he wanted to get the lefty vote, so he legalized pot. It was a political thing. Do you think present day cannabis is still political?
No, I think the stigma's gone. I think folks are happy to, be able to go to a corner store. I mean, it might be all glassed up and kind of a weird experience, but no, I think it's pretty normal. I think, especially in political circles, conservative circles, people don't have to hide it anymore. So it's kind of liberating. Yeah,
no kidding. And on the, I don't want to say like the far right, I think that mischaracterizes it, but under the sort of libertarian mindset, certainly, cannabis has really never been an issue, right? I think people always, wasn't it the thing, like, what was that bumper sticker about, I'll protect your right to marriage equality if you keep your hands off my guns and my pot plants, or something along those lines? I think that was
I think Tim, was it Tim Moen? I think he was big on promoting that. But like even the National Review, like they've been and William F. Buckley, like they've been pro legalization for such a long time. So it's really this kind of the Jerry Falwell moral majority, kind of spooky evangelical conservatism, I guess, that was anti-pot. It just doesn't make sense. And hopefully the States moves on it federally.
Yeah, I should let people know, by the way, that you and I, in conversations that we've had off air, have always veered all over the place, and I enjoy talking politics with you because, you know, we don't really strategize too much what we're going to talk about. I want to ask you about Jason Kenney's leadership review. I want to ask you about the Brian Jean factor. I want to ask you about some of the things that this government's talking about and some of the things that opposition's talking about. But I think we can also go off on tangents. I mentioned Northwest Fest, which is this documentary film festival that we're proud to support, and one of the documentaries that we're going to be featuring is talking about supervised consumption sites and access to harm reduction services across North America, around the world. It's going to zoom out. It'll be bigger picture. This has been a conversation in Canada for obvious reasons. It's the other health crisis right now. Thousands of Canadians are dying every year, thousands and thousands in Alberta and BC alone. This government's taken an approach to it that's focused more on and has funded more recovery and the so-called detox and the sort of sobriety programs, or whatever you want to call them, as opposed to supervised consumption. In fact, it's become pretty clear that to this premier and to senior ministers and associate ministers, it almost seems personal, like there's almost a closed-mindedness to the idea of supervised consumption. You've been on the inside as we talk about things like legalizing drugs, and a lot of people believe that a pillar of harm reduction needs to be legalizing all drugs in Canada. What were conversations like on the inside on subject matter like this?
I think you had, with the previous government, a focus purely on safe consumption at the expense of recovery. I think we need to get to a place where we strike a balance. This is kind of a personal issue for me, and I think a lot of people come to it with strong opinions because they do have their own personal experiences. I have a father who had an IV drug problem, and it was really hard on our family, and it resulted in just so much trauma for the entire family. And this was in Saskatchewan, and there just were no recovery beds. So if you finally get your family member to a position where they're willing to go into detox, assuming they survive the 2 weeks at detox, and then when they get out, there's no bed in place. Like it's very scary for a family member who feels like they're getting close to, like, going into recovery isn't the solution. Completing recovery is. The recovery is a long-term project, but like not having a bed, I think Saskatchewan at one in the early 2000s may have had somewhere like 300 beds, you know, for the odds of getting a bed after detox is very slim. So then the option are like expensive private clinics in the US. I totally understand the tension here in Alberta right now between the recovery and the safe supply. I wish people would talk more openly about it, but it seems like everyone's really hard in their positions. I am happy to see like there's an incredible amount of recovery beds in this province, and I think that's admirable for this government. We've seen this kind of the social disarray that occurs, you know, around in downtown Calgary with their safe consumption site, supervised consumption site. I really don't know what the solution is, and you know, I'm a conservative, so for me, it's not about solutions; it's choosing the best alternative. I don't have to make those decisions right now, but I think. This is a tough one, Ryan. I wasn't expecting us to go on this topic.
And Blaise, either was I. I'm actually, can I just say, I think it's amazing that you just open up and you talk about, you know, your family's lived experience, your lived experience as a person. I was just on that from the 420 talk and sort of where the conversation tends to go. But look at this. This is your lived experience, your family's experience. So what's somebody going to tell you about your family's experience? And I, like, whether it's possible or not, or whether it's realistic or not, I endeavor, like, for example, for this show to be a place where people can come on from different perspectives and say, here's what I think and here's why I think it, and not just immediately have it dismissed by people. And part of me fears that not just talking about drug legislation or not just talking about harm reduction or not just talking about Alberta politics or whatever, I fear that we've left a place where we can have those conversations and where we can talk. And then both you and I are probably guilty of taking dialogue to that point. You've been a strategic director of communications for a politician known for pretty biting communication, right? I've lost a prominent talk radio job because I didn't really hold my tongue very well. Like, maybe both you and I are kind of part of the problem, but I also think maybe right now both you and I are part of a potential solution. I don't know.
Yeah, I think shows like this are important, reaching across the aisle and talking to folks that you like. Politics it's a contact sport, but it's still a sport. So, you should be respectful, and you shouldn't be afraid of confronting these hard subjects at all. I just don't know how we've gotten to this point where it's suddenly an epiphany to have respectful dialogue with people. Yeah. I don't know how we got here. I think social media plays a role in it. I think politics is very high stakes these days, so it's kind of a win at all cost mentality. I'm not really into that kind of stuff anymore.
And it's like a different playbook, I think. You'd hear stories back in the day. I mean, here's an Alberta reference. People outside Alberta may not know, but like Brian Mason, former NDP leader, and Thomas Lukaszuk, Alison Redford's deputy premier, reportedly used to go for beers all the time. Yet if you'd listen to them exchange barbs in the legislature, you'd think they couldn't stand one another. And it was sort of the performative element of politics and then the real life stuff on the side. I think people like to hear that those conversations happen away from the cameras, that politicians actually can cooperate and work together, because I wouldn't blame anybody for being under the impression that just doesn't happen anymore.
No, it used to be theater, but now the theater has become reality. Folks are, pretty dug in on either side. I think the fact that politics has become a younger person's game. And perhaps the players, they just don't have the life experience by virtue of their age. Not any sort of character flaw, but people get very impassioned on these discussions, whether it's like supervised consumption sites, carbon taxes, and you go to that 15-second soundbite where you're trying to get, like with the premier calling public insurance Soviet style versus free market, and you basically start believing your own spin, and that's where you get into trouble.
Let me ask you about insurance. It's been reported, I think after the opposition, the NDP was asking, where's this report that's been released annually for years, and it didn't come out this year, about insurance profits, that they're up 150 million.
It did come out.
Yeah, no, it's out now.
On a Thursday afternoon.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Right before the Easter long weekend. Yeah. Exactly. I'm surprised a couple firings weren't included there. Profits up $150 million. I don't believe that profit's a dirty word, but it's on the backs of Albertans who are paying more after this government removed the caps, the insurance caps, back in 2019. From 2019 to 2020, up $150 million. Insurance companies profiting $1.3 billion in the province of Alberta last year. As you mentioned, the premier says he's not a fan of Soviet-style public insurance. He's happy to let the market rule. Didn't the government impact the market by removing the cap? I mean, everybody's talking about how life's more expensive now.
Yeah, I'm from Saskatchewan. I know I bring that up quite frequently. And we have SGI there, and the Sask party hasn't touched SGI one bit. You know why? Because everyone loves it. It's cheap. It's reliable. I wonder if the premier has ever had to find insurance for himself, because it is a tedious process. It takes like an hour to get a quotation. You have to answer a myriad of questions. It's a real time sink. And the way it works in Saskatchewan, SGI offers basic insurance, and then brokers are able to offer additional coverage in a free market system. But what it means is everyone has access to reliable, low-cost, basic car insurance, and that matters a lot when you're a lower income household. That you've got a stable price on your car insurance, and even if you do get in an accident where you're at fault, you're not debilitated with increased premiums down the road. And like the Saskatchewan Party government, they talk about the free market system as well, but they have not touched any of the crowns. In fact, they created an additional crown, I think, for tourism. The fact is, people, these are things that people need in their life. Like there's no alternative to automobile insurance. There's just automobile insurance. And you really don't have that much choice right now. And I obviously they wanted to bury this report for a reason, and I'm sure 2021 will have even higher profits. And I don't know if you read Rick Bell's piece this morning, but he's starting to connect the dots on why we're at where we're at, and I think folks would find that interesting.
You and Rick Bell have at least one thing in common, which is that both of you appear to have publicly fallen out of love with the Premier. Is that a fair assessment?
I wouldn't say we were in love with him in the first place. We admired him, and he sold. He offered a compelling vision for Alberta in 2019, and a lot has changed since then, and I'm not sure he's been able to pivot.
So what was it?
And there's a lot of disappointment around that.
So was that what prompted you? Like, to be clear, you left a job with this government, correct? A senior position with this government.
I did, yes.
Yeah. May I ask? I mean, and if it's too personal, you can tell me to buzz off. But what was it ultimately? What was the straw that broke the camel's back for you?
It was the culmination of a few things. I don't really want to get into it too much. I'm a conservative. I'm not happy with what I saw on the policy side. I think we're missing. I'm still a UCP member. I'm a proud UCP member, and I'm going to vote in the leadership race. I believe that the foundation of the UCP is strong. And I believe in ideas and parties. I've been around long enough to know that, ultimately politicians will disappoint you. So you shouldn't kind of, I don't want to say worship them, but you shouldn't rely on them too much. But you can rely on ideas, and you can revisit ideas as well. And you should, re-examine things that you believe in previously and compare them to the current material conditions. See, I'm talking like a Marxist now.
Well, no. But Blaise, you're talking about, the person versus the party and where people focus their support. And ultimately, that's what 15,000 plus Conservative Party members, United Conservative Party members in Alberta are doing right now, or being asked to consider. I don't know how many will actually participate in the mail-in ballot. It's being reported that the results will be released on May 18th, and I know that a lot of people are curious to see what that'll look like, whether or not Jason Kenney will survive this. If he does, what that means for the party moving into the next provincial election, and if he doesn't, what that means for the party as well, with a few potential leadership candidates appearing to knock on the door. The leadership race itself, Premier revered, I think. Even people that don't necessarily like him will acknowledge he's a great political organizer. He surrounds himself with skilled political soldiers. What do you imagine is going on behind the scenes? I mean, I know that his chief of staff took a leave of absence to basically quarterback the leadership campaign. That says something.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught his news or yesterday. He looks stressed. I don't think this is not a good time to be a conservative in Alberta. This leadership review should have been over. It's not. I fear that May 18 is basically the end of the beginning. There's a lot of legitimate questions about the integrity of the vote. I mean, my ballot has an incorrect postal code. I have yet to hear a compelling reason for why that is the case. And what does that mean for folks who already sent in their ballots? Like, are they going to get lost? Are they just not going to make it to the Deloitte's office? We were given numerous reasons for why the vote in Red Deer couldn't happen. It was parking, it was safety, but also it was liberating because we were giving franchise to all the members. It's clear why the vote was changed, because I don't think he was going to win that one. And the mail-in ballot lends itself to things like ballot harvesting, ballot curing. I believe constituency associations will be dropping off ballots en masse at the auditor's office. I mean, we were told we couldn't do a mail-in ballot at the outset of this leadership review precisely because it lent itself to so much dodginess. And yet here we are. We're back at it.
It sounds to me like you don't, in advance, you already don't trust, or at least you're cynical about the results of this leadership review.
I think it's entirely legitimate to be cynical about this right now. We've seen nothing but cynical ploys by some folks in the party and in the government. We saw some Tim Hooven in Rocky Mountain Sundry suddenly rejected as a potential candidate in a nomination. We saw another candidate rejected in a nomination for we don't know why. But we were told that if you defended these people being kicked out of the nomination races, you were called names by folks around the premier. You know, like this is the kind of nasty, divisive crap that we in 2016 and 2017 we're trying to eliminate from our politics here in Alberta. And now it seems like we've regressed so much. We're in a worse state than we were in 2015 as conservatives.
If Kenney were to lose, not to lose necessarily, but fail to achieve the 50% plus one approval that he needs, and I'd love your opinion on whether or not you think that 50% plus one is enough of a mandate to stick around. I doubt you'll say that it is. But if he were to walk away from this, resign or otherwise, do you see a front runner to lead this party into the next election and win it, to win a second term in government? Do you see a minister, or do you see an outsider maybe that could come in and be an effective leader and be what you assess this party to need?
I think we all need to take a step back and stop putting so much into the leader. I think we need to focus on ideas and foundational principles to unite us, rather than turning a party into a kind of cult where like the leader cannot be questioned. I think if you have a party that's built on solid policy, that's inclusive and respectful for all Albertans, that's the winning strategy. Having done quite a few leadership races, and especially in the climate we find ourselves now, that stuff just can be so incredibly divisive, and that's exactly what we need to get away from. I know this sounds like a cop-out, but I do not know who who the heir apparent will be. Someone else. Yeah, I'm fine with someone else. If it's Brian Jean or Danielle Smith, they all have their own baggage as well.
Brian Jean and Danielle Smith have had a crack at it, right? Yeah. And that's not to say that if you lose an election, you can't win a future election, but And I say this respectfully. I don't have a personal axe to grind with neither Mr. Jean nor Ms. Smith, but I quite frankly don't see how anything has changed. I mean, I think that Danielle has a lot of political experience. She's very likable. She's got her sort of legion of fans. At the same time, her exploration of ivermectin through COVID-19, I think, would really blow up in her face in a leadership race and in a general election for sure. Brian Jean's a likable guy. He's certainly very popular in Fort McMurray. That was evidenced in the by-election. But like I said, he led the Wild Rose Party for a number of years and quite frankly couldn't beat Rachel Notley in an election. And again, there wasn't a united Conservative Party at that point. But I don't know. I mean, whether you might take a look at certain government ministers right now, and maybe but I don't see that.
But this is what the pro Kenney people want you to think, right? They want you to think this isn't about my leadership. This is about you being afraid of what's beyond me. And I don't think folks should allow themselves to fall into that trap. The question before members is, how has this premier performed based on what he promised, what he's pledged? And I think voters or party members should focus exclusively on that. It's kind of a mind trick, and the premier is very good at framing ballot questions, and absolutely he wants this ballot question to not be about him, but to be about the unknown. And so that's precisely what this question is about that you're asking right now, and I don't think people should consider that. I mean, you could say like, oh well, you're just a stage one thinker, Blaise. You're not thinking beyond this. And it's like, well, in this case, I think that's okay.
It's going to be fascinating to see what happens. Again, May 18th, or at least that's the day that the party says that the results will be made available. Do you have a prediction? What do you think is going to happen?
I think he gets a number that he can tell folks that he has a mandate to carry on, and then the party implodes.
You think, really?
I do, which is unfortunate because.
So what does what does the landscape look like for Conservative voters in a year?
In a year? Well, perhaps you could see the Wild Rose Independence Party rebrand itself as the Wild Rose Freedom Party. And you have, I think there were 6 MLAs who were on the front steps of the legislature supporting the CAs that were upset with the switch to a mail-in ballot. You could see those 6 MLAs either kicked out or leave and join Todd Lowe and Drew Barnes, and perhaps Brian Jean becomes the leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party, but they changed their name to Wild Rose Freedom Party. So it isn't an explicit separatist party. And then you have them peeling off 5-10% of the vote in Calgary, and we're back at where we're at in 2015.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Aretha's got a question here for you, Blaise. She hits us up on Twitter at Real Talk RJ. She says, why does your guest block criticism on Twitter, and politics is not a sport? Sorry. Where do you stand on blocking people on Twitter?
If someone makes a personal attack or mentions, my family, that's an immediate block. So I'm not afraid of blocking people. I have my quality filter set really high. Twitter can be a miserable place as it is, and I just want to make it an enjoyable experience for myself.
You think there's reason for optimism anywhere in Alberta politics? I mean, it sounds to me like you're talking about a party imploding. You're talking about back where everybody was in 2015, people talking about a 2-party system, voting against someone as opposed to voting for someone. I mean, do you find reason for optimism from your perspective anywhere?
May 18th should provide closure. I hope it provides closure. I think Albertans deserve closure on this kind of chaotic 18 months. Albertans have been, subjected to very like the implosion of the one-party state has really destabilized a lot in this province, and we have some pretty significant challenges on the horizon, and we do need a government, whether it's a left-wing or a right-wing or centrist government, focused on those challenges. Not, the premier's right when he says he shouldn't have to be distracted with these kind of inside baseball shenanigans, but he's the leader. Like, it's his responsibility that we're in this position that we're in. I am an optimist. Whether something decisive happens on the May 18th, or if it doesn't, Albertans are resourceful, entrepreneurial people, and they'll figure it out one way or another.
That's Blaise Boehmer. He is Director of Corporate Communications and Public Affairs for National Public Relations. He's worked with the Saskatchewan Party. He's worked with the United Conservative government here in Alberta, including Jason Kenney's Director of Communications through 2 leadership races in 2016, 2017. Thanks for bringing your perspective to Real Talk, Blaise. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
You got it. You can let me know what you think about what you just heard. I saw a note from Charlotte. I want to get back. Let me see if I can find it. I always do this, Johnny. I want to scroll back on our live chat and see if I can find it, because she jumped out at me, and I appreciated her perspective. She talked about her, but here it is. She says, technically, says Charlotte, I'm a Lougheed-era conservative. That's like the Lougheed era of Alberta conservatism. Everybody goes, Peter Lougheed. A Lougheed-era conservative, says Charlotte, but Alberta conservatism post-Lougheed moved slowly to pure ideology, not solutions. But Albertans are not where the UCP and Alberta conservatives are. Why don't Alberta conservatives see this? That from Charlotte. And that's an interesting question. And she identifies, she says, technically, I'm a Lougheed-era conservative. And I think this is what's really interesting in talking to Blaise and other conservatives, including people that have worked as staffers, senior staffers in the government. You say, how do you see this all playing out? And he's talking about, well, you could have the Wild Rose Freedom Party, and they split off, and these guys go here, and these politicians move here, and they peel off 10% of the vote here, and there's shrapnel everywhere, and the party blown up. And typically, it strikes me that in situations like that, you've got a lot of the people who might describe their political beliefs, like I'm just talking regular folks. They might kind of describe themselves as like middle of the road. They go, I'm kind of a middle of the road person. I have priorities, like I don't want my taxes to go through the roof, but I also have priorities like I'd like to see kids have school lunch programs. I'd like to see supports in harm reduction, as an example, et cetera. And I want to have a party that I believe is reasonable, that approaches these things in a reasonable fashion. But you've got these real partisan options. I think for a lot of the so-called, quote, middle-of-the-road people, it's not a great option for them.
Not at all.
Interested to pick his brain on that.
I like what he said, though. Like, if Kenney doesn't get the numbers, he sees everything splitting. I know it's kind of dark for conservatives, but I feel the same way.
So May 18th, we'll find out. I'm excited to let you know that on the Friday before that, Friday the 13th, our Real Talk Roundtable, we have confirmed. We're excited. We believe. Should I announce it? Yeah, I think I'll announce it. The strategists are going to be joining us, and I'm looking forward to that. They do one of my favorite podcasts talking about politics across the country, in particular in Western Canada, in particular in Alberta. So you can circle your calendar for that. And, of course, we will remind you of that coming up. Before we take a look back, we want to reflect on something, recognizing the date today and how it's circled on the calendar. But first, it's Wednesday, which means we get to take a trip out to the mountains. And we look forward to this every week, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper. It's MyJasper Memories. And this week, we want to remind you that it's a perfect time of year. This is the excellent, in my mind, the spring skiing season. Arguably the most excellent time of the year to get out to the legendary Marmot Basin in Jasper National Park. Now, getting into the Alpines, not easy in the best of times, but in spring, with snow on the mountaintops, it can be even harder, of course. But we wanted to show you some ways you can get high up in Jasper National Park right now. So, of course, Marmot Basin, an obvious one. This, by the way, is Colin Borrow that you're seeing on the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, what a beauty, this guy. Marmot's ski director that was recently profiled by Tourism Jasper in their Venture Beyond video series, if you want to check that out. Marmot is open until May 1st, and they've still got great conditions. Don't miss their last hurrah. Big party up there, April 30th and May 1st. They'll have DJs, barbecue, prizes all on mountain. And, of course, keep an eye out for Colin. He'd love to see you. The end of ski season, always kind of a sad time, he says. He says he'd rather have, this guy, I love it, he'd rather have 11 months of winter. Maybe 1 month to golf. I don't know. 11 months of winter. He spent a decade of his young adulthood following winter around the world by switching hemispheres. This guy has lived his passion for the mountains. Again, you can check out the Venture Beyond video series. Just go to jasper.travel/realtalk and you'll find it. The second way to reach the high alpine in early spring is to hit the Jasper SkyTram, which just opened for the season. Wanted to give you the heads up there. This fun and fascinating ride takes you to the very top of Whistler's Mountain. If you haven't done it, it's so cool. You can rent snowshoes. You can walk to the tippy-top summit of the mountain. It can get a bit breezy up there, but it's a perfect selfie spot, Johnny, as they say, very Instagrammable up there.
Why are you mentioning me?
Even if you're not snowshoeing, you can still get panoramic views of multiple mountain ranges up there via the Jasper SkyTram. As mentioned, you can check out everything that we're talking about, plus our past features, by checking out the website, jasper.travel/realtalk. You'll be able to link to Marmot Basin. You'll be able to link to those videos, learn more about Colin Borrow, who chased winter around the world, and, of course, learn more about working in Jasper, all at jasper.travel/realtalk. So it is April 20th, this Wednesday, and that means that cannabis enthusiasts around the world will be toasting, so to speak, the date. It also means on this date, we've now hit the 1 year mark, exactly 1 year since the Prime Minister graced us with an exclusive one-on-one Real Talk. At that time, just 5 months old. It was the day after the federal budget was released. And so we talked about the federal budget. We talked about a few other things. And then, of course, I had to hit him up with this. I probably don't have to tell the Prime Minister that legalized cannabis that today is 420. 2.5 years into legalization, how would you characterize the impact that it's had on Canadian society, and what would you qualify as work that remains to be done on that file?
Well, I don't know what it says, Ryan, about you, but I've had a day full of briefings and press conferences and a question period, and nobody has brought that up before you did. So I wasn't even aware.
Well, I'm happy to help, today. Prime Minister.
I swear to God, what does that say? Listen, I think it was a decision based on evidence. It was recognizing that our current approach didn't work in past years, and being willing to make changes, even though we knew that would open ourselves up to vicious political attacks. It turned out that the sky didn't fall, that it was a reasonable path forward. There's lots more to do about, particularly on the opioids epidemic, in terms of keeping people safe, and we're looking for intelligent drug policy as we move forward. We've made investments in the opioids epidemic and greater consumption safe consumption sites and issues like that. But I think it's an example of something where people were going, "Oh my God, you can't do that, you can't do that," and then we did it, and everyone went, "Okay, so you did it." So we move on. I think whether you're talking about climate change, whether you're talking about medical assistance in dying, whether you're talking about many of the big contentious issues, Canadians have shown themselves to be remarkably reasonable once you do something that is the right thing based on science and evidence and reasonableness. People say, "Okay, sounds good. Let's make it work and move on to the next thing."
That was the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, 1 year ago today on this show. If you missed that interview, you can find it under the videos link on our YouTube channel. And thanks to everybody that subscribes to our YouTube channel. We appreciate when you participate in the show, and that includes our question of the week, which is presented by our official research and strategy partners at Y Station. I want to direct you to our website, ryanjesperson.com. If you click on Connect and then Question of the Week, you'll find the link to Get Real. This week, building off this leadership review that Alberta's Premier faces, we're asking you, Kenny's political fate may be sealed in the next few weeks. He may outwit, outplay, and outlast all his rivals to remain at the head of the party he united, or he may be ousted in spectacular Caesar-esque fashion. Remember that Fort McMurray by-election on the Ides of March? Kind of an interesting storyline. Or he might call an election to force his colleagues into a do-or-die scenario. Or, of course, he could do something else totally unpredictable. This is Alberta politics. Who knows? There's already been considerable discussion around the leadership vote, especially as it changed format, as Blaise just talked about. From in-person single-day convention to the month-long mail-in ballot, we want to know your predictions. How will the Premier do in the end? What will be the impact of the voting format changes? What role will Brian Jean play, if any? And what lessons will we take from all of this? We're going to leave this open for a week and a half. We're launching it midweek. We want to make sure you have a chance to participate, and so we're going to keep this open on our website. We encourage you to complete it today. It takes like 2 minutes. And then, of course, we'll be bringing you the highlights, the data that we're able to glean from that in partnership with Y Station, and get some great insights into where this engaged audience believes that leadership review is going to go. We're grateful for our sponsors like the team at Local Environmental. You know that they sponsor Trash Talk. That comes up every Friday on the show. It's how we wrap up our week. Having a little fun, blowing off some steam. You can send us your Trash Talk to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Make sure you label it as such in the subject line. If you check out localenvironmental.ca, you'll be able to see under the About link the news headlines of what's happening with Local Environmental. So you've moved to the country. Now what do you do with your garbage? Or do you need a permit for a dumpster, a small business waste management, a step-by-step guide, or conducting a waste audit? Hey, it's Earth Day tomorrow. How much waste is your business producing? Learn more under the About section at localenvironmental.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers want you to know that the first of every month, including the 1st of May, groceries at 16 of their locations, all 16 across the province, are 15% off, minimum purchases of $75. You can also check out savings online and some of their feature meals, including Mike's Meals this month, the mushroom melt. Plus, their healthy insight. If you're looking to live a more healthy lifestyle, find out how Friesen Brothers can fit in online at friesen.com. Our friends at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge want to remind you they've got the 2022 Jeep Wagoneer in stock at both locations. This is the Jeep that everybody's talking about, Jeep's re-entry into the full-size luxury class. This is the SUV going head-to-head against the Escalade, the Navigator, and everything else. You can shop their inventory, new and pre-owned, maybe a new Ram to pull the holiday trailer, online. Just follow the Sponsors tab on our website. And our friends at Dairy Queen know that soon the grass will be green, the leaves will be back, but of course, 12 months a year, it's blizzard season. They've got the specials on right now, including the Oreo Cookie Blizzard Treat. You can download the DQ app and learn more about the offerings at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. They've got those new signature stack burgers out as well, 6 of them in single, double, or triple patty versions at the Dairy Queens of Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. When you visit them, you let them know you're there because you heard about them on Real Talk. Coming up on the show tomorrow, as mentioned, it's Earth Day. And so we're going to talk about how we can respect and reflect our commitment to protecting this planet we call home. It's going to be a great conversation. Plus, Clearview AI, controversial in law enforcement, but it's factoring in facial recognition software in the war in Ukraine. We're going to get into the details you need to know to better understand that story. That's coming up tomorrow on Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, technical producer John Hicks, managing director Josh Dunford, account coordinator Lawrence Sterlego, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is the flagship property of Relay Communications Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.